Hello there, Digital Studies 101 students. I am recording a video here on week 3, day 3 in the late afternoon, early evening of this day because, as I said in the announcement earlier today, I'm traveling. I'm actually in my parents' backyard in Tennessee, so I was not able to get the video for today done before today, but I did post all the notes and things earlier this week, so hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at that. Hopefully you're already working toward it. And in this video, what I'm going to be doing is talking through the object lesson assignment a little bit more. I just want to make sure you all know what you're doing with this, and because I think a lot of you are going to be doing it on the weekend. I want to make sure you have plenty of resources that help you get oriented on the work. And then I want to spend some time walking through the steps of creating a timeline with TimelineJS, which is the end goal for this project. It's a little bit technical, a little bit wonky sometimes, and I think talking through it and going through it makes sense visually on the screen here. So let me go through my slides. I got some stuff to talk about. So here we are, right? So day 1, you learned about the life cycle of things by looking at Phone Story, playing the game. It had 4 different levels to it. And also I asked you to read the article about coltan mining with the title, Your iPhone Was Made by Slaves, or I think it's just Your Phone Was Made by Slaves. And it tries to connect the conflict around the extraction of mineral resources to the products that those resources end up in, like our iPhones. Pretty interesting story, pretty troubling story, pretty disconcerting, some of the things that Kevin Bales, the author of that piece, was talking about. One of the keys, though, to think about as you kind of reflect on that piece, though, is, he ends actually on an optimistic note, because I think his main argument in that article and in the whole book is that we have, on the one hand, this problem of environmental devastation. We have, on this other hand, this problem of like horrible human suffering and exploitation. And he's saying we can actually solve one if we solve the other. And so he's actually optimistic because he says we've done the latter before. We have actually ended widespread slavery in the United States, for example. There are ways in which it continued after the fact. There's other, different things like it that, of course, still go on. But we, as a community, said we don't want this anymore, and we ended it. So he's saying if we can do that again, we will also have this positive outcome in the environment. So it's, maybe super idealistic, but I think I like that it's optimistic, at least. So yesterday, which was Wednesday, you learned about the labor practices at the assembly level. And so this is the 2 episodes of the podcast, This is American Life. That was the content for that day. And so that had to do with, on the one hand, Mike Daisy and telling his stories about going to Apple factories, or Foxconn factories, mostly in China, and then reporting what he found there. But it turned out he made up a lot of the details and embellished the details to make better stories, which I think could well argue is unethical, but he would argue that the ends of getting the story told and getting people to care about it justify the means of deceiving them about the facts, which is, I don't know if I go there with him. But I see his argument, I understand what he's saying, but I ultimately don't agree. So let me know what you think, post that in the Discord channel. Discussing Mike Daisy is the title of that piece. And as you notice, the title of the channel, and if you look at the way that I've organized the channels, what I find disingenuous about Mike Daisy's response is that it's always a story about Mike Daisy. It's still ultimately a story about him and what he did. It's not about what's actually going on at Foxconn. So I like the way This American Life did have a third act actually talking about what's going on and what we know and what we're doing about it. So the company, when you're going to be, or you have already chosen an electronic device to learn some things about, and that company that made that may have a website, hopefully they do, and on that website they may have a statement, a transparency statement explaining what they know and what they insist on in terms of labor rights from their subcontractors and suppliers. So see what they have to say about that, and see if you find anything interesting. Definitely share it in Discord. So here we are today, which is day 3. We're going to learn about e-waste now. So now we're moving beyond the lived history, beyond the phase of a device and its usefulness, and moving into the afterlife, which is basically just what happened in text. Okay, so then tomorrow we'll kind of wrap things up, right? So for today, the content for today, 2 things I want you to watch, 2 videos. The one on the left is a news reports documentary, frontline style documentary about e-waste recycling. And so we see some investigative reporters doing some work to figure out what happens to e-waste when it's donated to be recycled. They do some interesting reporting. They have GPS trackers on some of these things. They try to actually go to where those things ended up and find some interesting things, sometimes disturbing things. And then this other piece, E-Wasteland by David Federley, is another really interesting piece And I want you to watch both because they take very different stylistic approaches to essentially the same argument, which is that we should care about this stuff. We should make sure that it's being recycled in a way that's safe for the people doing the recycling. And so, but e-wasteland, I think, makes you care about that through emotional appeals, whereas the PBS report makes you care about that through intellectual appeals. And so I'm interested in both of those. I think we do need both, but I'm curious which of these two you find most affecting, which of these is more likely to change your mind about things. So check it out. I mean, I really like both of them for different reasons, as I said. And, oh yeah, sorry, this is automatically playing. I don't want them to play. I always hate when it does that. Okay, so then, yeah, think about the two different approaches. Think about the different editing choices that support those choices. So on the PBS report, you're going to hear a narrator explaining things. I mean, the reporter will be narrating, explaining what's going on. In e-wasteland, there's no voiceover narration at all. So you see very brief titles on the screen sometimes, just explaining where they are, but otherwise it's just ambient sound. There's no music. So it's just there to give you that subjective kind of on-the-ground feeling of being in this particular place, and pretty effective, I think, in making you feel like you're there with some real people. Okay, so this is just a creative response. I'll call this optional if you feel like doing it. The idea here is, like, once you've watched these two videos, use one of these GIF constructing tools to make an animated GIF of some moment within those two that you found interesting or particularly affecting. So I think probably e-wasteland is going to give you more interesting things to work with that you might have found particularly moving or troubling or just kind of interesting looking, whatever. And so there are several different web-based video to GIF tools. And I've got a link here to this one, Imgur.com's. Giphy.com has one that works pretty well. So in all of these cases, what you do, actually, I'll just go ahead and show you. So you go to VidGIF and you paste the URL for your GIF for the YouTube video just here in the browser, and then hit submit, and then it gives you a little slider where you can choose the part of the video that you want to transform into a GIF, and then it takes you through the process. It's very self-explanatory once you get through that. So try that out, and if you make something interesting, share it in Discord, as always. Okay, so let's talk about the roadmap for the object lesson project just a little bit. I don't know, I feel like maybe I'm belaboring this, but I always get questions, and it makes sense to me in my mind, so I want to try to explain it in maybe a different way and see if that makes sense. Your first step is going to be to choose an object, and I've got in this little GIF scrolling here several different examples of objects that I have taken apart in the past, that students have offered to be taken apart in the past. So, VCRs, those are the only ones that I think are kind of tricky and, messy because the gears usually are greased on the inside. Otherwise, this stuff is pretty straightforward. You usually just need a small screwdriver to open these things up. But I do recommend opening it up if you have time, if you have a good space to work, if you feel comfortable doing that. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, if you don't think you have the right tools, I'm not going to insist on this. Like, this is just, it's something that is fun to do. So I imagine, or I hope that you will get to do this. But if you choose not to, if you feel uncomfortable doing it, if you would rather focus on other parts of this assignment, it is acceptable not to crack open your device. But it is fun to do, so I recommend it, like I did the other day on my live stream with a Teddy Ruxpin. Even though that Teddy Ruxpin did not end up being super interesting on the inside. Okay, so once you've cracked it open, or once you've just even isolated whatever the thing is you're talking about, you're going to start investigating it. And that investigation is probably going to follow one of these three tracks here. And that's going to focus on the prehistory of the object, the lived history of that object, or the afterlife of that object. And I think for most people, they end up focusing on one of these three. You should start your investigation just by looking at all three and deciding which one you think is going to give you the most interesting things to talk about. So the prehistory is everything that happened before you got the device. The lived history is everything that happened while you had it. And then the afterlife is everything that happens next. And what you're looking for as you do the investigation are events. So you're trying to find out significant events in the life of this object. And those events are going to fall into one of those three stages. But you need to find those significant events and get as much information about those significant events as you can. That information will sometimes be very difficult to find. In a lot of cases, you're going to have to guess, make educated guesses as much as you can. Make sure you can explain why you made that particular educated guess, but go ahead and make that educated guess. That's fine. So I don't know what device you're going to choose. I don't know like the right answer for these things. I don't know when a particular chip was in your thing was made. But if you show me a picture of it, I can interpret it sometimes, and I might be able to help you figure that out. But it's not like I'm holding on to this knowledge and waiting to see if you can report it back to me. I mean, I'm just waiting. This is investigation on your part. That's why I call it investigation. It's not really research. You're not going to be able to go to the UMW library website and type some things in and get some answers to your questions. You're going to have to do some taking apart and thinking and working to figure that out. So I'm on my parents' deck out here, and there's a lot of birds, including a house fence, which are super noisy. Anyway, so this is an example of an event you might find. So this is a chip, and by looking at some things and some information on this particular chip, I was able to, actually not that chip, but a different chip, I was able to determine something like this, that this was made in December 2008. This was probably made at this particular business park in the Philippines. And the event is, this chip was made. This chip was made sometime before the object in question. The object in question that I'm getting these from is a Guitar Hero controller. I don't know if you remember these, right? So it's you plug it into your PlayStation and it's got the buttons. It looks like a guitar, but it's got buttons instead. So that's what I took apart, and I got a few basic chips there. And I found this particular chip probably originated here. So that's a significant event in the prehistory of this, of that Guitar Hero controller. It had to exist, and it existed because of this event that happened in December 2008 at this location. That the event was that this particular chip was fabricated. So then, so if we think about then the lived history, so this was something that I got as a Christmas gift in December of 2011. So I think that's a picture of me. I can't tell if it's a picture of me or not, actually. I don't remember having a shirt like that, but because I made this slideshow a couple years ago, so I don't remember where I got that from. But anyway, yeah, so that's an event that I definitely remember. It was an event that was significant to me, so I can tell you when it happened, but also it's a significant event in the life of this object. Think about it from that Guitar Hero controller's point of view. It found its home, right? So that's kind of fun. And I can think of other events. I can think of the times that I used it. I can think of times whenever I ended up putting it in the closet, and not using it anymore. So those are the events in the lived history. So as you see on the left, by the way, you're looking for 15 total events. And so that can be some from the prehistory, some from the lived history, some from the afterlife, or 15 from one of those three if you can get that much. But you're looking for around 15, and that's a ballpark. It's not a minimum. But do your best to get as many as you can, and around 15 is ideal. That's kind of the sweet spot there. And then if we're thinking about the afterlife of this thing, right? So this is guessing, in 500 million years or so, the Earth will be swallowed up by the sun, and so whatever material is left behind by this particular Guitar Hero controller will be absorbed into the sun at this point. I can tell you it's made of plastic and resin and epoxy, and so a lot of those materials will probably still exist in a pretty recognizable form in millions of years. So that's the kind of thing that we're thinking about. The long geological timescale of the Earth is something that we are now contributing to whenever we use these things and then give them up to be recycled. So wherever, whatever landfill that ends up in, and that's where a lot of plastic ends up, that's going to still be there probably in several million years, unfortunately. Okay, so then once you got all these objects, all these events rather, so you're going to be putting these together into a timeline. And like I said, you can focus on the prehistory if you want to, so you might have 12 from the prehistory and then 2 or 3 from the lived and 2 or 3 from the afterlife. Or you could have just 1 or 2 prehistory and then a lot of lived history and then one, try to get at least one from each of these things, but as many as you can. And or it can be mostly afterlife. Of course, the afterlife might be mostly speculation, but you can think about different kinds of afterlives. For example, if this is an object that you went and bought from Goodwill, which is something that people do for this project, that's part of its afterlife. At some point, somebody gave it up to Goodwill. That's an afterlife event. And then you bought it from Goodwill. That's another afterlife event. So these are the kinds of things that you can speculate about. You're probably not going to be able to figure out whose it was, but you never know. Whoa. Okay. There's a big old, I think it's called an assassin beetle, just landed right on my monitor. All right. Well, it didn't assassinate me, so I'm good. Okay, so as you try to figure out what's going on in your device, disassembling can be a useful step to learn about the prehistory. So I want to give you some advice about doing that if you want to. And then once I do this, I'll transition to the TimelineJS part, which is the main thing. I'll just check on my OBS. Okay, good. So this is the kind of thing you're looking for when you disassemble a device, because something like this has a lot of interesting information on it, and also is something that has its own separate prehistory, its own separate life before it became part of this object. It was fabricated somewhere, probably somewhere near the place where the final object was assembled, but you don't know for sure. And you can start learning, actually, you don't even have to guess. A lot of the stuff you can learn about if you understand what you're looking at when you look at the markings on it. So if you find a piece that's not like inherent to the circuit board, but is soldered on like this, these are the soldering points, all the silver kind of things on the outside of the black rectangles, that's a good sign that this is something that has a separate life to it, and you can actually learn about that a lot more often than even the overall thing. So again, you're looking for where, when, and what for each of these things. It's an event, and an event takes place at a particular time in a particular place, and you need to know what happens. So let's consider this chip. This is a chip, and this is a pretty typical kind of thing that you'll see here. And there are lots of numbers and lots of markings on here. Some of these are fairly, I don't want to say self-explanatory, but some of these are easier than others. And I will give you some sense. And the big thing to keep in mind is context, right? So when we look for pictures, so one of the first things you should look for is a picture. Sometimes the manufacturer's name will just be spelled out, or it might be a recognizable logo, like Texas Instruments, very recognizable. It's a picture of the state of Texas. So if you see that, you know that it was made by Texas Instruments. This one was a little bit trickier to find, but I did find it. It's a company called Cypress. And if you look to, so like you can't, if you don't know the name, you can't just like Control F or type it into Google or something. But you can find often websites that will have all of these just displayed in a way that you can look through it and then try to find it. If you have one that you're pretty sure is a chip logo and you still can't find it, send it to me. Send me a picture in Discord, and I'll be happy to look for it, or I might recognize it. But let's see, I know the name, so I know where to look for that one in this list. It may not actually be on this list. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so it would actually no, wait, that one's very similar. They were probably a different era. But yeah, this is a pretty striking logo. I think it looks really cool, actually. So that's the Cypress Semiconductor. That's the company that made this chip. The design is slightly different, but it's close enough. Also, if you can see it under the text CYP, that's also an abbreviation for Cypress. And now that I know that that's Cypress, that's something I can confirm with that context. Okay, so I know who made this. I also know when this was made, and I can do that because I can interpret this date code. Date codes follow a particular set of formats. If you Google this, integrated IC date codes, that's what you're looking for. And this web page, there's a couple more. This breaks down some common formats that you'll see that in, and you basically have to use context to figure out which one makes sense for your object. So I'm pretty sure that this Guitar Hero controller was manufactured in 2007, and so which I know based on other markings on it, or just the context of it, that I acquired this in 2011. So and I'm pretty sure I got it on whoever bought it for me got it on clearance, which is fine, obviously. So that means that whenever this was made could not have been any later than 2011. So any number that I suspect could be a date code, I want to look for numbers that are plausible years that this could have been made in, and the 07 there is definitely plausible. So that gives me confidence that this is the 4-digit year, week format, which is probably the most common. And you'll definitely see this a lot. But you do have to kind of know a bit of what's going on. You see several examples on this page here. So this one, so 9106 is the 6th week of 1991. 9122, so sometimes they're swapped. 9122 is 22nd week. In this case, I am pretty sure that 0749 is the 49th week of 2007. So that's why I was able to say earlier December. Like I can pick I can pick the month that this occurred in. So that's giving me some pretty specific information. The what it is going to sometimes actually yield results. Like this turns out to be a generic USB interface controller. That's something I found by searching for this part number. I know this is a part number really just through process of elimination, because I know that 0749 is not a part number because that's the date code. I know that PHI is not a part number because that's probably an abbreviation for the Philippines. CYP, these are different types of things. And I would do both of these. I would search for this big long one, which is like CX7C63413C-PVXC. I've also got down here CYP 665510. There might be two different part numbers. There might be the part number that Cypress calls this within their own internal logic, and then there might be the part number that whoever made the Guitar Hero controller, they might have a different way of referring to that same part. And that sometimes happens whenever there are different contractors making the same kind of chip to plug into an object, like this. So that's might be what that is, but often you will find that, and sometimes you'll find a data sheet. A data sheet is going to be a PDF that explains in detail what is the chip, what do the different pins on it do, and like how much does it weigh, things like that. Also, you will usually see on a data sheet, if you can find it, an explanation of what all the different marks mean on it. So you might have already figured some of that out just by guesswork, but it'll tell you for sure on the data sheet sometimes, like what do these actually mean. So sometimes, like in this case, the country of origin looks like it's printed on their PHI, but sometimes there's just like a number that refers to a country, and the data sheet for that chip will tell you what the number corresponds to, what country, and then that narrows it down a lot. So that's great. Okay, so this is the kind of thing you will start collecting, and this is I don't know why I located this one in Austin, Texas. I'm just noticing this. Why did I write it that way? I just did this part a few minutes ago. I don't know why I wrote Austin, because it clearly says Philippines on it. But this is the kind of thing, just keep a list of what you find as you find it. And you can do this on paper, you can do this in an unstructured way, it doesn't really matter. You're going to be transferring this data to TimelineJS, but don't worry about TimelineJS while you're doing the research. Do the research first, figure out as many things as you can, do your own spreadsheet if you feel like it, literally write it on paper if you feel like it, a Google Doc, Word doc, it does not matter. Just start to collect that information about each event. So you might want to organize it a little bit as a table, perhaps, to kind of have different rows, whatever makes sense to you. You're looking for a date, you're looking for what happened, you're trying to figure out where if you can, and if possible, have some piece of media that goes with that, like a photo, like a, even a video. Sometimes you can find like a commercial for the product, that kind of thing. Any kind of media that you think would be interesting to associate with that particular event. So that's the information gathering part of it. Okay, so let me just check my time on this one. Good, so I'm going to switch now to talk about TimelineJS. I'm going to go through the process of making a timeline and then rendering it. This is the process you'll do once you have the information. So I don't have like pre-composed like fake information. I'm just going to kind of go through the process of creating the TimelineJS spreadsheet. So you'll be able to see that from start to finish. Let me actually scroll this down a little bit here so you can see my tabs in case there's some information that you might need to keep track of there. Okay, so I don't have this broken out step by step. I'm just going to go through it, and hopefully it makes sense. So to do this, you start at the website timeline.nightlab.com, and this is Nightlab is a journalistic organization or foundation, I think, and they produce pretty interesting digital products like this. They do their own journalism too, but they also produce these tools that help other people do journalism. So pretty neat. TimelineJS is very well known and popular. They've made some other really cool ones like StoryMap.js and a bunch more I'm blanking on at this point, but this is how it works. To make a timeline, right? So they do have a video here. Actually, that's pretty cool. I think that might be new. This is a video explaining how to do it. Probably wouldn't hurt to watch this, but I'm going to do my own video as well. It's good to have different ways of getting the same information. And what we're doing here is you're going to be making a Google document spreadsheet. So here, the first thing just goes to this make a copy button. So hit the make a copy. You can't do anything until you've clicked that button, and that ensures that you are big just flew by. That ensures that you're working in your own copy of this spreadsheet and not on the sample one with all of the placeholder data. So this is now my copy of this spreadsheet. You can see the title up here says copy of official TimelineJS 3 template. All right, so I would recommend something else, like name the title something else first. So Zach's timeline of the Guitar Hero controller, like literally anything, it doesn't matter, but something that that makes sense to you, that helps you find this easily. I guess I should have said this first. You do need a Google account to access this, a Google Drive account. That's where this is being saved. So if you don't have that, you should probably set that up first. Okay, so that's step. What is it? Oops, I did not mean to close that tab. The Wi-Fi is a little slow out here, but kind of far away from the house. Okay, so read the steps. The steps are explaining things pretty carefully, but you do need to make sure you understand what the steps are saying, and so that's why I'm doing this kind of talking here. Okay, so you notice I haven't actually edited anything yet. I'm not actually entering my own data. I'm going through these steps first. So I made a copy by getting this template, and as you see the note here, don't change the headers of any columns, and also don't leave any blank rows in your spreadsheet. So this is a spreadsheet, but it's expecting the data to be in here in a very specific way, and if you mess that up, you can break it so it doesn't work anymore. So you definitely do not want to mess with row 1, and you also want to make sure you don't leave any empty rows. You'll be adding events to this row by row. Just make sure, and it doesn't matter what order you put them in, because they will just be sorted by chronologically, but just make sure you do not leave blank rows between events, because that will actually cause the whole thing to break. So don't do that. Okay, so what does it say to do next? It says, go to File menu, Share Submenu, select Publish to the Web. So I'm going to go up here and File, and I hope you can see, I hope OBS is picking that up. Yeah, okay, good. Sometimes OBS doesn't pick up menus. So I'm going to go to File, and then, what did it say? Share, and then Publish to the Web. So you notice I'm not making it editable by anybody. I'm just going here, and let's see. Anything else? Green Publish button. Are you sure you want to publish this? Yes, I do. There we go. Now, it's going to give you this thing that looks like the public version of your spreadsheet, but this is not the URL that you use. It actually used to be, but Google changed the way that you interface to spreadsheets, and so TimelineJS now expects you, they need you to do it a different way. You do not actually use this URL, this version of your spreadsheet. You can see it here if you want to. You can view a public view of this spreadsheet, but there's no reason to. So that's what you want. And then it says, you copy the URL from the browser's address bar, which you'll need in the next step. So I'm going to go here to my address bar. That means up here, the location bar, whatever you want to call it, the URL. And this is a pretty long URL, right? So it starts with docs.google.com/spreadsheet/ a big long thing, which is actually the secret token for this spreadsheet. And that's what TimelineJS actually needs. So I've got that on my clipboard, and I'm going to come back here and Command V to paste that. There are some settings to change, but I'm not going to do that yet. I am, though, going to go ahead and preview this in a new tab. And this is going to look, it's going to look like placeholder content, but what's cool about this is that it's actually already this live spreadsheet that it's live data being pulled from this spreadsheet now that is in my drive. So I'll show you what I mean by that by changing it. So you remember I called this Zach's timeline of a Guitar Hero controller. So I'm going to make that the actual title. I'm going to put that in the headline column of the first row. Notice the first row does not have very much data at all in it. It shouldn't. It should be empty, and it should have title selected as the type. That's the only kind of fiddly bit here, I think. But make sure that I'll do Command S over here to make sure that that's saved, and then go back to the preview that I generated from the website earlier. And sometimes it does take a minute or two before it actually grabs the new one. There it goes. So so that is now my copy of the spreadsheet. And this is, by the way, this super long URL up here, this is what I need from you. So when you're ready to send this to me, either by submitting it in Canvas or sharing a link to it within a blog post or even sending it across Discord, this is the URL that accesses your spreadsheet. And that's what I need you to send me. It's going to be pretty long. You're welcome to use a link shortener service if you prefer that for some reason. It doesn't really matter because it's just a link I'm going to click on. So however you need to send that, that's what you need to send. I can't access it if you send me this URL because this is your Google spreadsheet. This is your document. I don't have access to your document. I do have access, though, to this rendered view of the timeline, and that's what I need to see, both because that's how I'm going to access your information, and also I want to make sure you got it working, because this is part of the expectations for this assignment. Okay, so now that this is working, we can start having some fun. We can start adding some information and some media to it. Again, this video that I'm recording is getting kind of long. I'm not going to go into this for much longer, but the basic idea is that you change the data in here. You can, let's see, so my chip, I remember I had 2007, and I know that was in the month of December. I don't know the day, so I'm just going to leave that blank. All right, and this one, so events can have a beginning and an ending. I don't think this one has an ending. I think it's just it has a beginning. So I will say then that this is the day when, what did I call this thing? Yeah, this is when the, oops. Okay, I need to get back. I can't get out of this view of it. So let's try this. Well, I was trying to get the actual name, but I'm not going to, this thing's being awkward here, so I'm going to just try to remember. So I think it was a USB USB IC controller chip manufactured. Okay, so that's going to show up as the headline. And then I'll say, then the text part is where you're going to see a paragraph of text. So I'm going to write the part number, date code, and the logo markings all tell me this was made in December 2007, probably at the Cypress Semiconductor Fabrication in Austin, Texas, which I guess I must know somehow. So let's just see how that looks. Every time you change something, I recommend do a save and then do a refresh. And what the advantage of doing that is that if the thing I just did caused a problem, I will see that problem immediately, and I will then be able to know what made that problem a problem. So you see here, it has not actually updated yet. So again, it just takes it sometimes just a minute or two. Yeah, there we go. So now there's the text that I have. It's still using the image that was there to begin with, but this is what my text looks like. It looks like I could probably write a little bit more here. So, I have room to do that anyway. So I could add a bit more to this text column. But I also I do want to put some media here. I want to have like a picture of this or, something else. And so let me just see if I can find a location for this, because this is always kind of fun. So if you go to Maps, so Google Maps, and you just say Austin, Texas, that's where I think this was made. And then now that my map is focused on Austin, Texas, I don't know, let's just see if Cypress still has oh, they do. They do have a location here still. So yeah, there they are. That is probably, well, it looks like it's now called Infineon Technologies. So that's probably the same location. If I want to, I'm probably not gonna have the bandwidth to pull up Street View, but that's probably where they are. So I feel pretty good about that. So check this out. You can actually copy the URL. So this is the URL that my browser is currently pointed at for the Google Maps view, and I can put that here in the media column. So I'm going to delete the Flickr URL and put the URL for the map in that place. And what that should do is render a nice looking like sub view of that map. So looks like it reverted back to the original for a second. Okay, so like I said, sometimes it takes a few tries. So there we go. So it actually is pointing me there, and it's a nice little embedded view of this. Now the subtitles don't make sense anymore. So it says Chicago to NYC and ZachWiseVerity.co. That's no longer the information. That's where that text goes here. So I would say the media credit here is Google Maps. Come on. Google Maps, and then the media caption would be something like location of Cypress Semiconductor Fabrication Plant. So this is the caption that will appear underneath it. Austin, Texas. So you can add that. You don't want to make the caption too long, but something like that is pretty good. You can also add images. If you want to do images, they need to be uploaded somewhere else first, and that does take a few more steps than I have time to show you. But there's a couple ways to do it, and one, probably the easiest, might be to upload it into your own domain and then grab the URL of it after it's been uploaded. I can show you how to do that in a different video, perhaps, because I need to wrap this one up. But that's something that can be done. Or you can also just upload it to Flickr.com, which is what these are doing. When you do that, you get a URL that you can share to other people. Imager.com sharing no longer works. It used to work, but it doesn't anymore. If you want to, I believe they do have some, yeah, here we go. So there's a lot of pretty important, pretty common questions show up in the frequently asked questions. So if you're trying to do something and it's not working, then see if there's already someone posing this question and see if the answer appears there, and that might be the case. I believe they did have an FAQ about images, but I don't see it now. So, if you have issues with that and you can't figure it out, then please ask me for help, and I'd love to help you figure that out. Okay, so that's probably good enough. I think I'll go ahead and wrap this up. 34 minutes ended up being longer than I meant, but hopefully that was helpful to see me work through some of those things. So this is week 3. This is day 3 of week 3. Week 4 is really just a day to work on the object lesson. So there are some notes that I've shared, but no new content to look at or think about. There's a couple of things just to look at briefly, but nothing big. So take a look through those things. I'm at my parents' house for the weekend, so I may have time to do another video. Well, we'll see. But anyway, hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching. If you do have questions, as always, Discord, the help channel, that's the place to ask those questions, and I'm happy to help, even though I'm on a little vacation here. So, all right. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.